Welcome. I'm Elizabeth L. Bradley, and I have the pleasure of interviewing for today's program my mother, the illustrious retired attorney Elizabeth Franco Bradley, who also goes by Liz Bradley. Thank you so much, Mom, for joining me today for this program.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure.
I know as two mother-daughter lawyers, we don't give up an opportunity to chat often.
Well, especially if you're a defense attorney and you get paid by the hour.
No wonder I ended up a plaintiff's lawyer doing contingency. I'm efficient with my time. So I wanted to start out by talking, obviously I know your history, but I think that your path into the law and your career trajectory and everything that you accomplished as a lawyer is just very fascinating and admirable and inspirational to me. But I know firsthand, not only to me, to many other women and other lawyers that you have come into contact with throughout your career, either as a role model and an example in the legal community or as an employer. So I really wanted the opportunity to have you share some of that history and experience with us. And so I think a great starting point is, since you didn't follow the normal kind of college straight into law school trajectory, that you share with us what your path was. How did you end up in the legal profession or on the road to law school, wherever you want to start?
Well, when I was in college, the usual procedure was my classmates, or whoever the class was probably getting married at least a year after college. And I actually did get married a year after college. And the idea was that I was supposed to be a homemaker, and my husband, Frederick Lewis Bradley Jr., who was a lieutenant in the Navy at the time, would be the breadwinner. So I was the homemaker for a number of years.
And you were, let me just interrupt real quickly. You were the first in the family to go to college, isn't that right?
Yes, that's true. My mother had a 5th grade education and was raised on a farm in Mexico, even though she was born in the US. But anyway, I learned how to do everything at home. I refinished furniture. I did gourmet cooking. I planted flowers. I did embroidery. I sewed the children's clothes and my maternity clothes and made us matching clothes. Anyway, at some point in time, and I joined the Navy Officers' Wives Club. At some point in time, when the kids were going back to school, were going to be in school, at the time they were 5 and 10, I had learned everything I could learn at home, and I thought I should go back to school.
And what year was that?
That was in 1973. So I had previously worked as a juvenile probation officer. So my work was crossed between social work and criminal justice. And I looked into what opportunities were available to me educationally, and I chose the law school. Not because I had ever wanted to go to law school, not because I knew a lawyer, not because I ever heard of canned briefs or interrogatories, but just because the tuition was less and the opportunity for financial advancement I thought was a greater opportunity.
When you say the tuition was less, you were considering other alternative continuing education besides law, right?
Yes, I could have become a court reporter, which would take 2 years. and would cost $1,800 a year. Or I could have gone to law school. At that time, they did not charge tuition. They did charge fees of around $840 a year. So it was much cheaper to go to the law school than it was to go to the court reporter school. My
That's amazing.
teachers had recommended that I try to get into Stanford Law School. But at that time, Stanford Law School cost $15,000 a year. And we just didn't have that kind of money. It never dawned on me to take a loan. But it also took almost an hour to get there, coming and going. And with kids at home, I didn't have time to be traveling that long.
So what school were you focused on trying to get into? This is when we lived in San Francisco on the Navy base when I was in kindergarten.
So then I was applying to more than one law school, but the one that was my preferred law school and that to which I got accepted was the University of California, Hastings College of the Law. It was located 3 or 4 blocks from City Hall. I could walk to the municipal court, the Superior Court, the Court of Appeal, the Federal District Court, and the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The only one I could not walk to was any version of the United States Supreme Court. But I did have a retired justice from the United States Supreme Court who taught a class on United States court cases.
It sounds like you were excited at the opportunity to kind of be in the hub of the legal, community in San Francisco. What did you have encouragement from the family? I want to just point out that my grandmother, Liz's mother, is in the portrait over my shoulder here, who Liz referred to earlier as having grown up in Mexico. But since she had, as far as I remember, about a 6th grade education, did you find that she was encouraging or not encouraging in your pursuit of a higher education?
Well, my mother, actually, she only completed the 5th grade. And she did always encourage me to go to college. Somehow she knew I had to go to college. She didn't know if she would be able to afford to send me to college, but she always addressed me as if it was a given deal. There was no option. But she had to work the whole time I was growing up. And she always wished that she would have been able to be a housewife that stayed home and took care of the baby or the little girl and gave her milk and cookies when she came home from school. And finally, her daughter actually married somebody where financially, although his income was modest, I didn't have to work. And she figured that if I went to law school, I would end up working, and she didn't want me working because she wanted me to stay home giving milk and cookies to my little daughters.
Well, I have to say, there's so much talk, probably not in the early stages of your career, and maybe not even in the later stages of your career. You retired in or about 2010, and there wasn't a lot of talk about work-life balance in probably your younger years as a lawyer, and even mine. I was admitted in December 1994, and I don't remember there being discussions at all about work-life balance. I don't remember having been the human resources officer at your law firm, in which started in the 80s. We'll talk about that a little bit more later, but I saw a lot of attorneys come and go from that firm, and I don't remember there ever being any conversations about work-life balance. I don't remember attorneys going to their children's soccer game, softball game, basketball game, cheerleading. I think we're in a different time now. And it seems like in those days, you didn't really have an option to kind of mix being a really hands-on mom and an ambitious career woman. It seemed like it was one or the other. Is that how you felt in those days of your early career?
Well, I had been home most of the time for 13 years by the time I went to law school. And by the time I started working, my attitude was I had to do what was required for the job. And I assumed that my children had been taught how to take care of themselves and were honor bound to do the right things and not to misbehave. So when I was at work, so I never worried about the children. I should have been worrying about the children, but I wasn't worried about the children.
I'm gonna plead.
Just
I'm
because I need this deadline.
I'm gonna plead the fifth on that one. And I turned out okay, and my sister turned out okay. But you know, and growing up, what I consider a latchkey kid, which was a term that isn't so common anymore, we were on our own a lot after school, and did miss having the interactions. Like I would see some of the mothers that were, you know, had the time and ability to be more active in their children's life. But looking back, as an adult woman and obviously as a practitioner, I really can appreciate the pressures that you were probably under to perform. You finally found your passion, because I think even though you weren't really aiming to become a lawyer from the time you were a child, that wasn't a dream. Once you set out on that path, it turned out to be an extremely good fit for you.
When I started my first job as a lawyer, I started out prosecuting traffic tickets. And many of the lawyers made fun of me because they didn't think it was a very substantial challenge or job for a lawyer. I was happy trying traffic tickets because I felt that somebody had to do it, and it was going to be me, and it was going to be done right. And I did.
And is that the point in your career that your colleagues nicknamed you Killer Bradley?
That was the point in my career when I started coming back from these misdemeanor jury trials and getting conviction after conviction. But they were not murder trials or attempted murder or arson. They were drunk driving or drug cases or prostitution cases. And although the legal principles were not that challenging, it was like getting paid to learn how to try a case. I got to the point where I just knew the jury loved me. Well, they didn't end up loving me all the time, but while I was prosecuting, they loved me most of the time. And so I was getting convictions right and left. And so they nicknamed me Killer, but it was really a ridiculing. They were ridiculing me. The man who started calling me that when he used to work in Hawaii, he used to try murder cases, flood cases, huge, important cases. And he really was a trial expert. And when the misdemeanor prosecutors were calling me nicknames, he nicknamed me Killer Bradley. just to make fun of the fact that I was being successful in small cases. But the nickname stuck with me when I went into private practice, civil cases, and learning how to try cases and sharpening my skills in the evidence code was a huge help in the rest of my career.
Do you feel that starting out later in life, because I want to backtrack a little bit, you graduated from law school in 1977, right?
Yes.
And you didn't have the fortune of passing the bar on the first time, so that delayed you a bit. How old were you when you actually passed the bar and started working as a lawyer?
I can't remember whether it was 39 or 40 years old.
And so you're starting out practicing as a, adult woman, and with a history, with a husband, children, work experience, life experience. Did you feel that that helped you, or did that hinder you in any way in dealing with either your classmates in school or your colleagues in your early career?
Well, I had worked for 3 years as a probation officer, most of the time as a juvenile probation officer. And some of the times I had to appear in juvenile court on these cases. So I had quite a bit of experience of interviewing people and presenting facts to the court. So I was feeling kind of secure in myself as having very similar experience to what was required of a lawyer.
Do you feel that you were treated differently in any of your job interviews or the application process because you're a woman or because of your age?
Well, I had a legal writing teacher in my first year who had previously worked as a federal defender.
Were you finished?
Well, I lost my picture.
Oh,
I see my picture in
Do you
the
see
corner,
picture?
but not in the big picture when I'm talking.
do you see my picture?
I see your picture little. So I'll just keep talking.
Okay.
Anyway, I talked to this lawyer. He was now in private practice in San Francisco. And I told him that I had a late start. And he told me it would be very hard for me to find a job because I was going to be 40 by the time I was looking for my first job. And he wished me luck, but thought it might be nearly impossible for me to get work because law firms didn't want such old women working there. And I assumed that would be the case. It took over 100 applications to get a job. But as it turned out, one of my classmates in law school had gotten a job at the San Diego City Attorney's Office. And he, the person who was doing the hiring, asked him if he knew me. And he recommended me. And I ended up getting hired there, even if I was older. But I never looked older than any of my classmates who were at least 10 years younger. So I don't think I had much discrimination because of my later age. But I did have challenges of my being a woman attorney, especially a trial lawyer. And I did not want to be an adoptions lawyer or a family lawyer or a trust and estates lawyer. I wanted to be a trial lawyer.
And those were like family law and adoptions, those were fields that women lawyers were traditionally enter at that time,
Yes.
right?
Yes, and the trial lawyers were mostly men. In fact, I don't remember any one woman who I characterized as a trial lawyer. And the first civil case that I went to court on, it was a construction defect case. And in the construction defect cases, there were usually many parties: subcontractors, contractors, developers, plaintiffs. And when I got there, the judge was a man, the court clerk was a man, the court reporter was a man, 30 lawyers were men. The men who were defense attorneys came with insurance adjusters. They were all men. I was the only female attorney, and it happened that my insurance adjuster was a female. And after that, many of those men attorneys thought they could take advantage of me. And they learned their lesson.
You now take advantage of you being less experienced, or because you were a woman and maybe you weren't as strong of an advocate. Is that
Yes,
what you mean? And
yes,
well, just knowing you the way that I do, I would assume that there were occasions where they learned their lesson because you beat their brains out
yes.
on the facts, on the law.
I was very meticulous about doing all my research, but during part of this time, I was married to a lawyer, and I would come home and complain that so-and-so tried to take advantage of me. And he said, I should be grateful that these men lawyers were underestimating me, because by the time they found out that they were estimating me, I had now beaten them. And so he said, don't try to force them to acknowledge your competence. Just, beat them up with your knowledge.
Yeah, I've never heard you tell that particular story. And you're talking about, my stepdad, who you went on to become law partners with for many years. And I worked in a clerical staff position for many years. And then ultimately when I passed the bar as a lawyer as well, but maybe I heard it through kind of osmosis, but I have felt that way in my own career. And, I've been practicing for 26 years now, and most people think that I'm more junior than I am. And when I was only a 10-year lawyer, people often thought I was a brand new lawyer. And while personally, I love that, professionally, it can feel a little daunting when, I think it's only human to want credit and to feel recognized for your talents and your intellect. And I do though think that as I progressed in my career, I came to understand what you just described. And that is, if you're not in a situation where you're either being taken seriously or recognized for your skill, that it can be, if you use it to your advantage, such an advantage. And I try, when I'm mentoring younger lawyers now, female lawyers, women lawyers, I pass on that story, because I think it can be such a strategic advantage to, just like you said, by the time your opponent has figured out that you are skilled, you've already laid the groundwork to take advantage of that situation. And and I think finding comfort in a place where I know my own worth and I know my own value and what I bring to the table, and not needing the approval of my opposing counsel, or not needing the recognition by my opposing counsel, even though I think on a human level, it's nice to get it sometimes, or get it from the judge and not be underestimated by the judge you're appearing before. But really learning that it can be a strategic advantage, and take advantage of that when you're given the opportunity, because once they figure it out, then the cat's out of the bag and you're probably not going to get that opportunity.
I remember one case when I was prosecuting misdemeanors, where this particular case, there were 4 defendants who were involved in the same misdemeanor. I don't remember what their crime was, but I was working and making offers at a particular early part of our relationship. And I offered them that we would settle the case if they would plead guilty to a certain something and pay a certain fine. And they refused to do it. And so all of them insisted on a trial. And of course, they were found guilty. And additionally, their fine was the same as I had offered them before the trial. And the lawyer said, the next time you make me an offer, I'm going to take it. I don't need to try a case to find out you were right. And that was very rewarding.
It is rewarding. And I think also sometimes when you're in a hard fought case and you get positive feedback from a judge, that can be very rewarding as well, especially when it's been a really difficult, challenging litigation. But the common thread that I see through your career is that you have always been, and I've witnessed it firsthand, both first as an employee and then later in our careers when we were fortunate to become law partners, and we shared a law partnership for 5 years. You are extremely meticulous and thoughtful and strategic in what you do. And I think that whether you're prosecuting a misdemeanor as if it's a death penalty case, or you're handling a brain damage case for Ford Motor Company, you are an extremely meticulous attorney, and you not only expect that from yourself, but you expect that from people that work with you and that have worked for you in the past. Do you feel that you having a male law partner for many years, that you had any challenges in your role as a managing partner and a supervisor, being a woman as opposed to your male counterpart?
I didn't really notice that much between my partner and myself. But some of the male associates would sometimes not respect my authority. But as was my practice with litigation, they just can't get away with that. I would not let them get away with that.
And how about you've had an extensive career as a trial attorney. I don't, you can share with us, I don't recall how many jury trials you've had, but share that with us, please. And then also, do you feel like you had any challenges with the judiciary and how you were treated, particularly in the cases where you did construction defect litigation for a long time, where at the time it was a very, very male dominated segment of the legal industry? Did you feel that you had any disparate treatment from the judiciary or signs of even if it's implicit gender bias?
Um, when I entered this field, I was under the understanding that women as lawyers were discriminated against. And every time I had an opportunity, like when I got hired at this civil defense firm, every time I had an opportunity, I felt grateful that I had been given this opportunity. So when things didn't go the way I thought they should go, I never assumed that it was because I was a woman that that I didn't get the result that I wanted. And it could have been that I was being discriminated against, but I wasn't looking to identify problems that way. It was like, I'm having a problem, how am I going to handle this? And there was a time when the presiding judge of the San Diego Superior Court called my partner and asked him to get me to stop challenging the judge that handled the construction defect cases. And the judge had issued a ruling against my client after trial. One of the jurors almost fainted in the front seat. The jurors all told me that my client, who was the plumber, was the most credible of any of the witnesses. They couldn't understand why the judge had granted a directed verdict against him. And I could understand it because no one else had ever tried a construction defect jury trial. And if that judge had allowed me to win that case, other lawyers would be demanding trials, and they didn't have enough judges to try all those cases.
Wow, so you had the first construction defect trial in San Diego?
Jury trial.
Jury trial. And so did you stop challenging that judge?
No, but we did get the presiding judge to persuade the judge who had done that to stop doing it, to stop doing directed verdicts, or basically stop picking on our person. And we said we would stop challenging him. Everybody in the firm, by that time we had about 25 lawyers. Everybody in the firm was instructed to challenge that particular judge. And if they did not, they would be fired. So it wasn't just me, it was everybody that came up to one of those hearings where they were assigning the judge. So that particular judge stopped what I would call misbehaving.
Well, I think it's interesting that the phone call was made to your male partner and not to you. I'm just curious if that thought ever crossed your mind as to why that was the way that went down, as opposed to talking to you directly, or maybe they just felt that it was more persuasive to have your partner put pressure on you.
They tried to get him to persuade me to stop challenging that judge. And by the way, that judge was my favorite judge. And at one point in the middle of my challenging him, I told him he was my favorite judge and that I was sorry he'd made me do that. And he said, well, you're one of my favorite lawyers. and we're going to figure out how to handle this. Eventually, he talked my opponent into accepting the offer we had made before we tried the case,
Oh, wow.
which was less than 100,000, maybe, I don't know, 27,000 or something like that. And if we had waited for the jury verdict, we would have gotten a zero verdict, but it was going to cost a lot more money to keep fighting it than to just agree to pay. And actually, it resulted from the judge asking me if the appellate decision had come out yet, because he knew what he did was wrong. And I said, no, the appellate decision has not come out yet, but when it does, you're going to look pretty stupid. He said, why don't you? Well, nobody else was there, so I wasn't embarrassing him. Well, I don't think so. And I said, if you don't want that appellate brief to come out and show what you did, you've got to get the other side to agree to accept the offer we gave them before the trial. And he got the other side to agree to take the offer we gave before the trial.
Well, this sounds to me like an element of your character that I've always admired. And it's what you did was, the position that you took was a form of advocacy on behalf of your clients, not just that one client that had the unfavorable decision, but the rest of your clients who might be in front of this judge in future proceedings. And I did want to touch in our talk today a bit about your advocacy and mentorship, particularly of women and minority law students and lawyers, because it's been such a huge part of who you are and the example that you've shown to me, and that I've tried to incorporate in my own life and practice. And I have a couple memories that I wanted to ask you about, from starting with your law school days, when even before you were a practicing attorney, you were advocating for women's rights in law school. And I wanted to start particularly with when you were at Hastings and you took it upon yourself to advocate to have more representation of women and minorities on the UC Hastings board. So could you tell us a little bit about that experience and what motivated you to advocate in the way you did and how it turned out?
A lot of the students were complaining because there was no student representative on the Hastings Board of Directors. The Hastings Board of Directors was set forth in the education code and was law. The UC system and the community college system, the law there required them to have boards of directors that were representative of the population of the state. At our school, all of the men were white. All of the members were white males. All had gray hair or no hair. There were no women. There were no young people. There were no students. And I formed a committee that got the legislature to introduce bills that would have restructured the Hastings Board of Directors to be compatible or comparable to the requirement for the UC system and the community college system. The Board of Directors called me in for a meeting and said they were shocked that I would have gone to the legislature, the Assembly and the Senate of California to ask them to carry this bill, and why had I not spoken to them about it? And I said, I believed that if they had wanted to change the nature of the composition of their board of directors, that they would have done it. So I didn't think that it would have been productive for either of us for me to take their time. Well, they claimed they were not going to take a position on this bill in favor of the bill or against the bill. But they hired a full-time lobbyist and they defeated the bill. A year later, somebody in the assembly, I can't remember that assemblyman's name, reintroduced the bill and the bill got passed. And now the Hastings Board of Directors is reflective of the composition of the state. Men, women, and minorities.
Yay.
And
That
I'm
was-
happy about that.
That was a fantastic accomplishment. And I think the fact that a man came back a year later and helped push that through is a really important thing for us women to remember, that a lot of men are our allies.
And by the way, the only people who would join my committee for that were 2 white males.
Wow. So we just need to remember that we shouldn't only be looking to each other as women for allyship and camaraderie, but there's plenty of men in the profession that are ready, willing, and able to, either at our request, or apparently this man did it on his own initiative, to pick up the baton where you left off and get this important piece of legislation passed. So have you had other situations where you felt that men were allies to you and helped you in your career?
A lot of people, a lot of males, male attorneys have helped me. I circulated in the American Bar Association for a while, and they were trying to identify minority firms that were capable of handling their cases. And there were several men from corporations such as the Ford Motor Company, Atlantic Richfield Company, Wells Fargo Bank, who recommended me to receive work, and who either wrote letters of recommendation or articles. I had a huge article written in my law school magazine about my Hispanic history. And that was all due to not just white males. We had an African-American male who was general counsel of Chrysler, who was very supportive, at least encouraging.
Well, I know that it was when you started landing these really high level Fortune 500 company clients, I saw that you really went out of your way to make sure that they were staffed within your firm in a way that women and minority associates, that you worked hard to recruit and make sure that we had a really nice balance of all genders and ethnicities at the firm. But you worked hard to make sure that these cases were staffed proportionately, so that the women, minority, and male associates would have opportunities to work on these really high profile cases. What is it about just maybe your character or your experience that prompted you to be so kind of attentive or intuitive to the need for us as women lawyers to mentor and try to help promote other women and minority lawyers in being successful in their career, because you've really devoted a lot of your time with having many other responsibilities to that cause.
Well, actually, my goal of having a diverse legal staff began when, in the early years, we had 9 attorneys and 6 were women. And I felt that we needed to take affirmative steps to find qualified men to supplement our legal staff. After a while, we had apparently more men thought we would hire them once I started looking for them. When I started looking to diversify by ethnicity. And at one time, we had 40% lawyers who had different ethnic backgrounds. I was very active in the San Diego County Bar Association. One of the committees for which I got a Distinguished Service Award was my chairing the Diversity Committee. And I organized a conference where I got the participants of the American Bar Association, representatives of the major corporations, to come and speak at a conference where we had over 100 people attending, where they were talking about how the major corporations of the US were now looking to diversify their vendor pool of legal support. And whenever I would meet people and I had an opportunity to talk with them, I would discuss with them the opportunities of networking through the San Diego County Bar and the American Bar Association. I was also very active in the San Diego La Raza Lawyers Association, the women lawyers group called the Lawyers Club, and the National Hispanic Bar Association, many different ethnic groups. And I also participated in a group where representatives of the Asian lawyers, the African American lawyers, and the Hispanic lawyers would all meet at least once a month to discuss activities in the legal profession in San Diego with respect to diverse attorneys.
Well, I think it's fair to say that given that you were doing this in the mid to late 80s and all the way into the 90s, well, throughout the time that you had your firm, that you were really at the forefront and a trailblazer in this really industry-wide effort to bring attention to the diversification of the legal profession, and in really tangible, concrete ways. I know that sometimes it can be said that some companies, don't really put their money where their mouth is, and it's more of a slogan or lip service. But I know that you did, through your efforts of, being a really great marketer in your own right and getting clients, but also being really in the forefront of trying to help in whatever efforts you could do to help diversify the legal profession and encourage women and minorities to really to go for it. Did you see a positive change in what the corporations said they wanted and their goals were over the years to actually putting it into practice and giving out meaningful assignments and volume of work to women and minority owned firms? Did you see improvement over the years?
Well, before the American Bar Association started this program, I didn't see any efforts at all. And once the program got started, with the leadership of the people involved in the Commission for Opportunities for Minorities in the Profession of the ABA, yes, there were quite a bit of efforts made to send work. We received quite a bit of work for from a number of corporations. And I don't know if that lasted, because our firm closed in 1995. And so what has happened since then, I have not been actively participating in the legal community. So I really don't know what's happening right now.
Well, in the same capacity in the legal community, because you went into a sole proprietorship, or excuse me, sole practitioner, and then into legal practice with me before you retired, right? And so you weren't marketing for the same clientele that you were when you had a larger firm, right?
Right. Because the corporations don't want to send work to a sole practitioner or a two-people law firm. They want a firm. And once my partner had other plans for his future, we were not able to keep up the firm with the number of staff that we closed. When we closed the firm, we had about 15 lawyers. And so when I was either alone or with you, Elizabeth, most of the major corporations did not want to send work to such small firms.
Well, I would say that we did participate, just as you had at Viviano and Bradley, your prior law firm. We, as Bradley and Bradley LLP, participated in the California Minority Council program.
Yes.
And that is still going strong.
Yes, and we did get a very significant case from one of the companies that participated in that program.
We did get a large case from an energy provider that I ended up getting my first appellate published case from that opportunity. Let's see. A moment, let me just check my notes really quick.
Oh, I wanted to tell you about that. You asked me about had I had discrimination. There was a situation that I was not happy about. When I worked at the San Diego City Attorney, they used to have written evaluations once a year. And this particular year, there were 20 lawyers that were being evaluated. Only 2 of them got rated excellent. Myself and a woman lawyer that I trained. And at about that time, the district attorney's office opened their application process under the civil service. And I took the test. And a passing grade was 70. And one of the 2 people who graded me, that came up with my evaluation of excellent, was a young white male. And he took the district attorney's test, and he did not get a 70 or higher. And even though he had rated me excellent, and he himself had not been rated excellent, he told me the reason I must have gotten a 70 and passed was because I was Mexican American. It was such an insult after I've been rated excellent, one of the 2 excellent people out of the 20, and the other one was the one I had trained. for him to take the position that the only reason I passed the district attorney's exam was because I was a Mexican American.
Wow, how did you handle that?
I couldn't understand it. There's nothing I could do about it. I didn't do anything. As it turned out, I ended up getting a job offer at a private firm, and I was happy there. Well,
The
substantially.
firm, this is the firm that you were the first woman associate, correct? The construction where you did most of your construction defect work?
Yes, I was the first woman associate and the first woman partner.
Which does have a little anecdote that I would be remiss in not bringing up, because it has reminded me of my fortune in having two of my partners are male partners that are just, I couldn't ask for better partners. And I can never imagine this happening at my firm today or in this generation, but how about the little anecdote about the partners lounge in this firm where you were the first woman partner?
Well, once I decided that I was going to go out and start my own firm, I gave my notice. At that time, any lawyer who gave their notice was escorted out of the office with security. I worked for 2 weeks after I gave my notice. And one of those days, after hours, I answered the phone. They were calling for one of the senior partners. So I went looking for the senior partner. We had something called a partner's lounge. By that time, I was a partner, but I was not an equity partner. They had 5 senior partners and 3 what I would call junior partners. And the door said partners lounge. We had been in that building for more than a year. I knew there was a partners lounge, but I didn't think it meant me because I wasn't the senior partner. But when I got there to ask this man that he had a phone call, all 7 of the partners were in the partners lounge. I was the only partner who was not in the partners lounge. I had not understood that it was the male partners lounge. And that's why in over a year, I had never been invited to go into the partners lounge.
Wow. Interesting fact to find out while you're on your way out the door, and possibly reinforce your decision to go, make your own way and start your own firm, which became very successful. I think,
yes, I myself and the firm were AV rated by Martindale-Hubbell.
I think there's a growing consciousness about what exactly is gender bias and what is implicit or unconscious bias that might be, instances where there's not necessarily any, overt sexism or racism, but perhaps just, unconscious things that contribute to inequity in not just in the legal profession, but in life in general. What do you think is more pervasive or worse, when there's an implicit or unconscious bias or an instance of overt bias?
Oh, when I was working at the San Diego City Attorney's Office, I did not advertise that I was Mexican American, but I belonged to the La Raza Lawyers Association. People knew I spoke Spanish. Sometimes I was asked to translate things. And after work one day, a few of us were together with some of the defense attorneys, and one of them was a Mexican American woman. And she was talking about how mean people were to her. because she was a Mexican American. And I said, well, I've been winning my cases right and left, and people know that I'm a Mexican American. I don't know where you get the idea. And my idea was she wasn't good at what her job was. And that's why they were critical of her. Because if they had been critical just because she was a Mexican American, they would have been critical of me because I was a Mexican American. That's the impression I got. That might not have been the real story, but that's the impression I got. I thought she needed to work harder at protecting her clients than worry about what other people might be holding against her.
Do you think that women have a kind of an inherently different leadership style or style of practice that men do?
Well, I think everybody has a different style. I wouldn't say that my partner, for example, my partner Charles's style was any different than somebody else's style on purpose. That's just the way he was. And my style was not patterned after any woman or after any man. It was, I'm going to do what I think is right. People need to respond to me in a way that's respectful. And if they don't, I'm going to demand it and see to it. And sometimes I wasn't very polite, but I wasn't going to let people get away with abusing me. And that was either whether they were women or men.
Well, I do think that some people can have, make assumptions that all women get along and all women are collegial. And I've had some of my biggest disputes or clashing of heads with women opposing counsel, even more so than my male opposing counsel sometimes. So I think I agree with you that how we respond needs to be really true to ourselves and setting our own standards, either in our practice and how we accomplish our job and how we comport ourselves, and not assuming that men are biased against women and not assuming that women are our best friends, because when in a litigation context, at least, an opponent is an opponent, whether they're male or female.
Well, I would agree with that.
And there might be other factors that cause women to feel the need to compete with each other, or that there's not room for more than one woman at the top, or which is why I've always been so impressed with your not only your mentorship of other women, but you're really working hard on, like so many women lawyers do, juggling their personal life, a million committees and volunteer organizations, and trying to be a positive contributing member of the profession, above and beyond being excellent at what you do in your job. Do you have suggestions for younger women or people of color starting in the profession on how to succeed and how to try to attain opportunities that might not be traditionally as open to them as to others?
Well, I don't have any suggestions on how ethnic attorneys can behave differently. You have to be who you are and learn to deal with the response by other people if they don't like who you are. But the women need to be a little bit more careful. I remember when I had a very important case for an automobile manufacturer, and their expert got sent to serve as our expert on that case. And he was very, I would say, he was very sad or unhappy that the lawyer that got assigned that case, who was me, who was I, was not a mechanical engineer. All other lawyers that he had ever worked with on their cases had been a mechanical engineer. And I didn't know words that mechanical engineers, he told me, how do you expect the jury to understand what you're saying, what you're talking about, if you don't know what you're talking about? And I said, well, it's not my job to teach the jury what I'm talking about, your cars. You're the expert, that is your job. So if you think that the words are too complicated for the average person like me, then the words are going to be too complicated for the jury. You must learn how to talk and everyday people talk. And I said, just sit up there and make pretend that you're a grandfather and that you're teaching these grandchildren about your work. And eventually he started treating me with professional respect, but then he invited me out for dinner. I denied the dinner, and now he invited me out for lunch. And now I had a feeling that he was going to put the make on me. Oh, excuse me. He was going to make inappropriate passes at me. So I insisted that some other female attorney come with me. And he complained about that. So you need to be careful that you don't let them get away with thinking that you're treating you like you're stupid, or that you don't get yourself in a position into a personally non-constructive situation.
Well, I think that's a good lesson in really you addressed his bias. It could have been on a number of bases, but his bias head on, but delicately. And you didn't address it in a critical way with don't talk down to me and don't treat me poorly because I'm a woman or I'm not a mechanical engineer, but you kind of massaged it into the conversation about the actual case and how the two of you needed to work together to present the case to the jury. And I think, when it's a client representative, it can be very tricky to bring attention to or highlight some kind of bias that you're observing, but you did it in such a way that it kind of killed two birds with one stone. You brought attention to it, but in a constructive way that would hopefully positively impact the way that the case was developed and presented. I mean, sometimes it might not be that easy, but my observation of you is that you can be diplomatic, but at the same time, you're not someone who bites their tongue, and you can be somewhat confrontational, even in a diplomatic sense, as you were with the issue with the UC Hastings Board of Trustees. I did want to touch on one other kind of fun experience that you had in law school, where you were advocating for women on what some people might think was a frivolous or not important issue, but I would tend to disagree. And that is when you advocated for an additional and achieved an additional women's restroom in the Hastings Law School. So why don't you share a little bit about that story?
Well, the law school was in an old building. By the time I got there, 35% of the students were women. Most of the classes took place on the second floor. And in the old part of the building, there were 2 toilets in the stalls for women. There were no toilets for women in the new part of the building. You either would have to take the elevator up to the mezzanine, the upper mezzanine, or the lower mezzanine. But between classes, the elevators were so full, you could hardly ever get into the elevator. So it was very hard to ever get to go to the restroom for the women. And I got the bright idea that we should get a new restroom. And I went to the women's union and asked to form a committee. Nobody volunteered. Interestingly enough, I didn't get any white males volunteering for that committee either. And that's supposed to be funny. And I got the maintenance man to count all the restrooms in the buildings, including the office of the dean. And we wrote away to the legislature. And the dean said, if ever they agree, you're going to be gone long gone. And before I left, we got the $50,000. They built a women's restroom on the second floor, so nobody had to take elevators, with 6 stalls. The bathroom was lined with pink tiles, and they had a grand opening where I was asked to cut a pink ribbon, and they brought some pink champagne to celebrate the opening of this restroom. No woman would serve on this committee because they assumed the legislature would not grant the money.
Well, kudos to you for having the gumption to go for it and not give up, and to recruit some male allies to help you get there. That's
Not
exciting.
with the restroom, not with the restroom.
Oh, not with the restroom.
I did that all alone.
You did it all alone. Wow, even better.
And the maintenance man.
And the maintenance man. So I just want to start wrapping up, and one of the highlights of my career as an attorney has been having the opportunity not only to work with my mother, because that was a huge opportunity, because when you were starting out and we were in high school and junior high, we never got to see you. The only way we got to see you was when you put us to work in your law firm. So I've had the pleasure of working with you for so many years, off and on, but really one of the most amazing experiences that I've had in my career was having 3 jury trials, second chairing I second chaired 2 jury trials where you were first chair, and then having you second chair me in a 10-day bench trial in Los Angeles. This was when we were both already moved to Los Angeles and part of the Los Angeles community. And I'll just never forget the trial that we had before Judge Palazuelos in Mosque, downtown Los Angeles. And we had the Latina judge, woman judge, Latina courtroom judicial assistant, the Latina courtroom attendant, a Latina court reporter, the Latina plaintiff's counsel, yourself, and your second chair, me, and 1 white male in the courtroom, and that was the defense counsel. And it was just a moment of, it felt like not just personal pride, but pride in our community and in the progress that has been made in the legal profession, to have a room full of accomplished professional Latino women representing the county of Los Angeles and the people who we were serving. How would you describe that experience from your point of view of trying a few cases with your daughter?
Well, I always enjoyed being with either one or both of my daughters, whether in person or on the phone. or on email, whatever. But working, I felt so confident that I could trust my daughter in the work that had to be done, that she would read the code section that applied. And it was just a joy to have her with me. But professionally, she's a better writer than I am. And even though I felt that I had more guts, she was a great help when I had to write these long papers, to have me correct the paper. She'd say things like, "What does this mean?" And I'd try to explain it. And she would say, "Well, then why didn't you say that?" So anyway, my work was superior when I had Elizabeth helping me. And I very much enjoyed having her for a partner.
Well, thank you, ditto, and likewise. It's been a great joy to share my career and to be inspired by you and have such a fantastic mentor and example in my life. And I want to wish you a really incredible birthday. Thank you for joining us and taking time out of your birthday to do this public service, to share your story and a little bit of my story, our story, with the community. And you've been such a meaningful contributor to the legal communities in both San Diego and Los Angeles. And I think that this program that the LA County Bar, this oral history program, is sure to let your story and the other stories of the other participants, live on long after you're practicing. And I just thank you for everything that you've done for the legal community and for me personally.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been an honor of you recognizing my work. Thank you so much.